Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Had Godzilla's Power. Deku was Godzilla Part 2. Before we start, please go support Anthony Tyler 9 for writing that awesome fanfic. Now let's begin. Class President's Rescue Training. Hey Kaken, what kind of hero team should we be? Izuku asked as he sat near his friend on the ground near the playground. We will be Mighty Man and Dynamite, the heroic duo who is smarter, stronger, faster than the number one hero, All Might, Kaken said as he smiled at Izuku. Well, is there a way to start training ourselves without hurting ourselves? Izuku asked as Kaken looked at Izuku. Well Zukun, we should probably work on our stamina as well as endurance. That way we can continue fighting for longer against our opponents and villains, Kaken said, smirking. That sounds great, Izuku said, jumping from the ground to start the training. The two would run around the playground as they were training to become heroes as children. The other adults in the area would look at the wonder duo with awe as well as chuckle at their antics. They would also cheer them on whenever they play hero versus villains, whenever the teachers joined in playing with the boys and girls. It wasn't until the day that Izuku had gone to go see the doctor that things began to change around him, and he knew it. Mrs. Aratani, see, can a quirkless person become a hero? Izuku asked as Mrs. Aratani looked at him. I'm not sure, there hasn't been one since the age of quirks began. I'm sure that whatever you do that you can become a hero. Aratani-sensei said, smiling at Izuku. It was immediately after lunch that the children noticed that Aratani-sensei wasn't present for the rest of the year preceding that question. Izuku woke up with a massive headache. He had been witnessing his oldest memories coming back as he slept during the night. He had no idea what they were trying to tell him, but he knew that they would come to a head soon and that he would have to be ready to fight soon. His alpha senses were moving about the area to search for a possible threat that was near the school, only to find reporters moving towards the school. Getting up from his little bed, he noticed that his father and mother were present this time as he snuggled up to them both as he gained a slight purr from both of them before leaving the platform. As he walked around the lost city of Atlantis, he made it to the small puddle of water that seemed more like a puddle than anything, linking the hollow earth to the land above. Moving into the water, he swam towards the surface of the above world of the hollow earth as he made his way swimming towards the land where his school was located. It wouldn't be until around 7 a.m. that he would arrive to the school in his uniform as he shook some remaining water from his head as he walked through the reporters as they tried to ask him questions about All Might. As soon as he entered the gate, he noticed that his tail seemed a bit heavier as he noticed some of his classmates hitching a ride on him. Kaminari-san, Ashido-san, why are you sitting on my tail? He asked as the girl stood up from his tail. I was hiding from the reporters. I didn't want to be stopped from entering the school because of their soundbites, the girl said, happily bouncing from one foot to the other, allowing him and Kaminari-san to watch as her breasts bounced with each jump. Shaking his head from the hormonal part of his mind, he walked towards the building where he found Ichako standing near the door happily waiting for him. As he continued into the building with her animatedly talking about what happened in the battle trials, he smiled at her open arms as she explained what happened in each battle. Truth be told, he had watched the battle trials, but he had been sleeping near the end of them since they were becoming more and more boring to him. He wanted to fight a strong opponent soon and would wish that he could meet someone who could match his strength class. He was already showing Scylla that he was a force to be reckoned with all on his own with his Titan form, and his human-Titan hybrid form was at least half the strength of his Titan form fully. Sitting down in his seat behind Kaken, Izuku waited for the teacher to enter the class as the rest of the students in the class had soon arrived and the teacher wasn't far behind. Hello class, I want to inform you that your training exercises were a good match. Bakugo, don't let your opponent string you on like that is how you can lose your life. Midoriya, when you are given an opportunity to defeat your opponent, don't let them continue breathing if it means that you can have a good fight, that is how civilians die. Todoroki, you need to make sure that you tone it down on your quirk usage since you need to use your fire more. Don't even start with me, young man, I will not have any of my students half-assing this class or else you will be placed in general education. Aizawa-sensei said as all the students nodded their heads as the teacher moved on to other subjects. Now for the most important part of your time here at UA, Aizawa-sensei said as he paused for dramatics. You will have to choose a class president. Aizawa said as he started to pull out a sleeping bag. What should we do to choose a class president? Iida asked, chopping his hand and arm in the air. I could care less about how it's done, just make sure you have two people acting as class and vice president of the entire one class. The man said before placing himself on the ground to get some much needed sleep. With Iida talking about doing the vote diplomatically, Izuku focused on the quirks of his classmates as he wrote everything he could about them without doing much of anything. Once he was given a few small pieces of paper, he wrote down a couple of names, one for each gender to who he thought would make a good leader for the class. Within a few minutes the tallied points were placed on the whiteboard as Iida tallied the numbers before people had drug Izuku and Yaoi Rozumomo up to the front. Izuku had still been writing in his notebook about what the class's quirks were as he finally noticed how the class was looking at him. Huh? When did I get up here? Am I note-taking and walking at the same time now? Izuku mumbled to himself as the class looked at one another. Well, I think that personally. This is good, we have a cinnamon roll as a class president and Momo as the vice would be able to curb his mumbling habit. One of the students said as Izuku shook his head. I thank you all for choosing me as the class president and I can certainly hope that I can live up to your expectations. Izuku said as Momo said the same thing. As the class went through the main part of the day learning English, modern art history, modern science and math, they had been too busy to notice a movement outside the gates as one of the people stared at Izuku intently. Only a matter of time. The hooded man said, walking away. Izuku was sitting at his seat as he had a small flask of radiation that he placed near his mouth to drink up for himself in order to keep himself going. He had been listening to his classmates talk about the history of each other's families, that he had spent his time looking out the window with a smile on his face as he saw the clear skies. I wonder how the meetings with the other class presidents and their vice presidents are going to be like. Momo asked as Izuku looked over at her. It will mainly talk about what we will be doing during the build-up to the sports festival, as well as the grading of class papers. We are basically taking desk jobs for free and helping the teachers lower the workload on themselves. Izuku said as he yawned. Not get much sleep last night? Echako asked looking at him. No, just some weird memories are coming back to me. Been happening since the first day of school actually, probably nothing. Izuku said as he grumbled about getting more sleep. The intruder alert, please form an orderly line and go outside to line up with your class. Intruder alert. Izuku noticed that the alarm was going off in the room as Iida grabbed the arm of an upperclassman as he asked what was happening. Their answer was that the school's been infiltrated and that the place hadn't been infiltrated in the entire time they had been there. Taking his classmates' safety into his hands, Izuku called his classmates over to him as he allowed them to climb onto his tail as he made sure that they were safe from any and all harm. Through the pushing and shoving, Iida had noticed that it was just the press as Izuku nodded at the boy as he called out the students of the school about how it was only the press and that they should conduct themselves in an orderly manner. After clearing out the hallways, the students of Class 1 had arrived at their homeroom in order to know what they were doing for Hero Informatics. It was here that their teacher had entered the classroom as he informed them about a trip that would be happening in a couple of days to do their rescue training. But for the day they would be training in quirkless combat. As the class got their gym uniforms on and headed outside to train with one another, Izuku had teamed up with Echako and Sayu as the two girls needed the training of fighting really badly. The training was brutal for the girls as Izuku held back a lot of his strength so that he wouldn't kill them, just bruise them slightly. The girls were thankful for the training as Izuku had been teaching them at the same time about how to launch a punch at someone as well as the weak spots to hit a villain at in order to incapacitate them fast. It was here that Izuku's phone went off as he looked at the hero news and saw that his parents were battling Ghidorah again as the monster was trying to defeat them both once more. I guess my home is going to be lonely again. Izuku mumbled to himself unknowing of the girls hearing that. Where do you live, Midori? Ishido asked curiously. I live at the bottom of the ocean. In the lost city of Atlantis. Izuku said, looking at them for a moment. Your home is the lost city of Atlantis, the whole class yelled. I mean yeah. Monarch has one of their massive stations just outside the hull heading towards it. Izuku said as the class asked to be brought there. As much as I would love to bring you all there, I can't. Izuku said as Momo and Echako looked at him confused. Why not? Momo asked as Izuku gave her a deadpanning look. It's filled to the brim of radiation. You all would die from the power the place radiates alone, the human body cannot handle the place. Izuku said as they looked at him. I was absorbing the power of both Godzilla's and Ghidorah's power attacks. I was able to continue to absorb the power, making me incapable of dying. That's different. Izuku said as the class collectively said drats. It had been a couple of days since the announcement of the rescue training as the class had gotten onto the bus in order to head there. It was a field trip for the class to learn how to be a real hero on the field just from the building they were going to learn it from. The teacher stationed there will be a high-ranking rescue heroine who had been in that portion of the business for years. They all arrived within about 2 hours at the building as it was shaped like a massive dome of glass. Well class, this is the place, get out and wait for the teacher to appear. Aizawa-sensei said as the class moved towards the building. It was here that the heroine that Aizawa-sensei told them about walked into view as they were smiling with their eyes. Hello students, I am sure you all know who I am, but I am the space heroine. 13 the heroine said as the class started to mumble about her quirk as well as hero status, with Echako being very vocal about it. There might be a few things you all need to learn about your quirks. It is that not all quirks are just for show, some of them are extremely dangerous, since you learned that from the battle trials. But if you all know about my quirk, it is a black hole that I can summon and displace at will. But with how powerful as well as the amount of people I had saved with it, it is just as easily capable of killing those very same people if I am not careful. I want you all to learn from this experience of rescue training and know that not everyone will be capable of being saved. You will lose the lives of the civilians you are saving. That is all I have to say about that part of the information. 13 said, as Izawa-sensei walked over. Where is All Might? The man asked, as the heroine pulled up 3 fingers that immediately got Izuku to think about the day All Might crushed his dreams. Can a quirkless person like me be capable of saving people with a smile like you? A 10-month younger Izuku asked All Might. You ask me if a quirkless person, someone who is without power, can become a hero. As much as I would love to tell you that you should try, I can't in good conscience tell you to become a hero. You could become a doctor or police officer, they get crap for not saving the people that heroes do and get a lot of flack for it, but it's a really good job to get. But you need to remember to be realistic. I'm sorry that I am the one to tell you this, young man. My words have consequences, and if I sent you out there as a new hero you would only die. The man said, before walking down the stairs. As soon as the memory was gone, Izuku shook his head more as he walked with his class that had started to walk away. They entered the building as they stood in awe of the areas that were created for their training, and they were all pumped for the rescue training to begin. It was here that the lights of the building started to flicker, and Izuku's dorsal plates began to spasm out of control as he growled. Midoriya, what are you doing? Aizawa asked, a little concerned. We're about to be attacked. My instincts are telling me to fight whatever is here. Izuku said, looking at his teacher. You will all leave immediately, and whoever Aizawa couldn't finish his sentence as a massive portal appeared in the plaza. It was large and purple in appearance as a hand was coming through and pulled it apart, revealing a villain who had hands all over his body as more and more villains started to swarm the plaza. As soon as all the villains had appeared in the area, they all stared at the seemingly terrified students as the hand's villain noticed Izuku's glowing dorsal plates. We will be taking that titan from you, heroes like you don't deserve a pet like them. The hand's villain said as his second in command disappeared as Aizawa went to fight the villains. As the students and Izuku were retreating towards the entrance of the dome, the second-in-command villain appeared in front of them. I apologize for the interruption of a sure-to-be rescue training session. But we are the League of Villains, and we are here to kill All Might. The misty villain said. USJ attack. I apologize for the interruption of a sure-to-be rescue training class. But we villains are here for the fall of the number 1 hero. All Might. The villain said, as he loomed over the class. As Izuku stared at the villain, he noticed how the said villain had a small weak spot that he was able to find, and just as he was about to move forward, Kitsuki had started to fight with the villain. Using the blonde bomber's attack as a distraction, Izuku ran over to the door whilst holding Iida with his tail and pulled him towards the door, and with a feat of strength that the engine boy couldn't understand, yanked the doors enough on his own and tossed him out. If you want to use your speed for something, Iida-san, you must use it to get our teachers, Izuku said, closing the door. As Iida was sitting there thinking about why Izuku had done that, they ultimately decided to just head out and find their teachers and get help. With the rest of the heroes present, they'd be capable of stopping the villains for sure, so while Iida was running away, Izuku noticed how the villain was about to release his attack on 13 from behind and charged an atomic blast for the villain. As soon as 13 felt her back begin to open up from her own quirk, a blast had passed by her black hole and sent the villain down towards the door. Looking over where Izuku was, she found his dorsal plates thrumming with power as he stomped over to the villain and stepped on his chest. As the villain was struggling to get the boy off of him, 13 used this time in order to get the rest of the students towards the door to evacuate. Midoriya, the rest of the students are out of there, we need to leave now, 13 called out as Izuku looked over at her. I'm sorry. The boy said before using his surprising amount of speed to slam the doors shut. Locked inside the building with the mist villain getting back up, Izuku stared the villain down as his emerald eyes began to thrum with an energy unknown to him. You are willing to sacrifice yourself and your safety for your classmates? The villain asked, stunned. I am the next in line for the king of the monsters, I will not be defeated by low-class trash. Izuku said as he attacked the villain quickly. While Izuku was fighting the mist villain, Aizawa was defeating villain after villain that was in the plaza, and he was keeping an eye on the blue-haired individual who had hands all over his body. Eraserhead is so cool, I can't believe that you are taking down my mobs. You really are a small mini-boss. Whatever, Nomu beat him. The hand villain said as the last thing Aizawa had heard was the stomping of the ground behind him and a fist being smashed into the back of his head, bringing his world into darkness. Izuku had sent the villain flying towards the plaza in time to see a monster smash his teacher into the ground. Aizawa-sensei, the boy called out following the villain to his teacher. As soon as he made it to the bottom of the stairs, he punched the creature holding his teacher in place, and it was sent flying in the distance. How did you manage to hit it? Izawa asked, as Izuku told him about his upgraded DNA. Well, at least you can handle yourself. What happened to the rest of the class? The man asked as he sighed, trying to get some breath back. Class is outside the USJ. Iida had run off to get the teachers on my order. I stayed back here to make sure that we didn't lose our teacher in our first year. Izuku said, standing in front of him. What do you think you can do against these people? You are only a student, Izawa scolded Izuku. Looking back at his teacher, Izuku showed the man his evolving eyes as he turned back towards the screaming villain man-child as he was running towards them with fury. Using his tail to swipe the villain away from him, the mist villain had used a portal to take the man-child and have him reappear above him as the villain slammed his hand on Izuku's back. The slap caused Izuku to look back at him with an unamused expression as the young man stared in shock as his quirk wasn't working on his body. How my quirk won't work on you, the man-child complained. I guess you need to know something, man-child. I am the son of the king of the monsters, and a puny quirk like yours won't even do a bit of damage to me. The only ones who can even come close to damaging me is either your Nomu or another titan. Izuku said as he grabbed the young man and threw him at the other villain too fast to be caught. As they both tumbled to the ground, Izuku smirked at both of them as he focused his eyes on the Nomu as it moved in the way to prevent any more damage to the two leading villains. Aizawa-sensei, I will take care of the Nomu. You take care of disintegration and portals. Izuku said as the man nodded his head as Izuku went on the attack. With all three villains split apart, Izuku spent his entire fight in keeping the Nomu away from his master as he beat it into submission. Punch after punch, kick after kick, tail swipe combining into another kick sent it into the water zone as Izuku slowly crawled into the water. Aizawa watched as his student willingly entered the water as if it was second nature as the hand villain began to laugh. Ha 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 ha, he won't survive against my Nomu as well as other villains there, the hand villain called out. And as soon as he said that, the other villains who were inside the water came running out screaming about a monster inside the water zone. As the villains ran over to the hand villain, they pleaded to be taken away from the area since there was a monster amongst them all. As the hand villain was about to scratch his neck in frustration as well as fury, a black blur had come flying out of the water towards the sky through the dome of the USJ. And what they all saw come out of the water afterwards was downright terrifying as a giant Ghidorah monster had appeared from the water zone of the USJ roaring into the sky as if it won a fight. Is that Midoriya? Aizawa asked as the other villains stared in both awe as well as complete fear. He beat my Nomu, that Nomu was supposed to kill All Might, that is legitimately cheating. The man-child screamed in frustration. Looking at the young man, Aizawa spoke up to him as he was wanting this fight to be over with so that they could look over the footage. But just as he was about to open his mouth, the glass from the dome had broken down again as a new monster had appeared in the area. It had massive wings as well as multiple legs that were as sharp as daggers at the end, and it had orange eyes with a look of contempt for the new Ghidorah. As the Ghidorah finally noticed the presence of the newcomer, he narrowed his emerald and moth-like eyes as he growled at the creature. The new monster clicked as it screeched at Izuku before going on the attack. Unknown to everyone else, Tokyo was being attacked by a similar monster, but bigger than what was attacking Izuku. Outside the USJ, 13 had been calling all the heroes and told them about how the USJ was being attacked and that Izuku and Aizawa were locked inside the building. After hearing that the teachers were going to be on their way over to the building as fast as possible, she heard one of her students make a screaming sound. Looking over, she saw how he was showing his classmates about an attack coming from Tokyo, who at this point was a massive monster who had no wings and had massive legs. It had grayish orange colored eyes as it smashed buildings in its wake in order to search for something. Alright class, get on the bus and get ready to head out, we need to escape from the USJ before that mist villain teleports us back there, 13 said as the students got on board the bus. It was here that some of the girls had called her over. What is it, Uraraka-chan? 13 asked as Ichako stared at the woman. Is Izuku going to be okay? She asked in complete fear. Don't worry, there is a reason why he has those dorsal plates on his back, they are more than an intimidation display. 13 said cryptically as she remembered the conversation between her and Nezu. So what do you need me to teach the child of Godzilla? 13 asked, 5 hours before the trip happened. Whatever happens at the USJ today, you are to allow young Midoriya to fight whatever and whoever arrives. You cannot stop him from entering his alpha predator instincts to fight a new threat to his reign over the earth. Nezu said as 13 looked at him incredulously. What about the possible damage he could cause to the building? 13 asked in complete worry. You don't need to worry about him, if he damages the building it isn't anything that Cementus can't handle. He will be able to bring the damage to property to a minimum if there is a chance of not doing too much. But if there isn't a choice in stopping the damage, he has full authority to fight whatever comes to fight him. Nezu said, not leaving any more arguments for discussion. I'm sorry for the outburst. 13 said, as she left the office. Shaking her head, she enters the bus when she noticed a blur coming to the building from above and slammed into the roof of the building. What the buck was that the entire class screamed out as glass had been blasted to the sky. Inside the dome, Izuku was seen fighting with a new monster as he tossed it around the different zones of the USJ. It really wasn't that powerful against him even if it landed some hits against his body, it seemed as if it really didn't have any experience in fighting him. And since Izuku has the mind of a human whose brain capacity is going millions of miles a second, the monster had no chance in hell against him. He was basically toying with the creature as if it was a new toy. But as soon as the creature had noticed its failed attack to kill him, it tried to flee from the area as Izuku gave chase. If this creature was going to where he thought it was, he needed to stop it. He stepped out of the flood zone of the USJ as he followed the creature and made sure to grab his teacher in the process as he broke through the building and placed him on the roof of the bus. With him breaking the glass on the bus window, he told 13 to drive the bus to the safety of the school campus as he had Yayoi Rozu place a camera on Izuku's back. As he was chasing the monster that was taking flight into the sky, Izuku felt something stick to his upper back and as he turned to see who did it, he saw Yayoi Rozu smiling at him before nodding. Returning the nod to her, he moved to give chase and headed towards the ocean where he could move faster to catch up. As it turned out, the new monster had arrived near the ocean as well as if in search of something important. And as it caught its breath, Izuku stayed beneath the surface as he waited for it to lean its head down closer to the water for the perfect time to strike. As soon as it went to drink from the salty seawater, Izuku struck as soon as its face guzzled some water down its throat and grabbed it by the wing and pulled it into the water. Knowing his advantage in the water against the creature, he started to twist the wing of the creature as he increased the pressure on it as he felt it rip and tear from it. As soon as he pushed the wing out of the way, he swam to catch up to his prey when another creature appeared and tackled him into the water. As it slammed its claw into his lower abdomen, he released his atomic breath and sent it blasted back when he noticed something off about his atomic ray. My power is being suppressed. He thought to himself. Shaking his head, he decided to go full power in fighting these monsters, and he could sense his father's presence watching the fight from afar, gauging his power compared to the other monsters of this world. Getting into his own fighting stance, he growled at the creatures as multiple helicopters had arrived on the scene in order to record the event. As the two had rushed Izuku, he went for the injured one after tail swiping the other into the water as he grabbed the claws of the smaller monster and pulling it to him as he grabbed the head of it and slammed it into the water as he stepped on its neck. Holding it under the water, he watched as the other one, noticing how his instincts told him that it was a female, but he had no clue as to what creature it was within his father's reign. Just as he was about to attack the female monster, a new one appeared similar in looks to Mothra, but it was different in terms of looks. It had purple markings on its wings as it started to screech at the female monster that had been fighting Izuku. Looking down, he noticed that the bubbles from the monster he was standing on had ceased as he decided that it was surely dead. As he took a few steps from it, he decided to follow that pre-quirk movie about double tapping, and as he charged an atomic blast at the smaller monster, he picked it up from the water and opened its mouth as he fired it down its throat. As its body awoke from being essentially drowned, it started to flail from being blasted down its guzzle, and it soon started to burn from the edges of its neck to its torso. And soon enough the head was decapitated from the body as said body fell into the water. Giving a winning roar into the sky, both female monsters ahead of himself looked over as he dropped the head of the creature into the ocean water as he lowered his gaze on the female monster in front of him. Clearly the Mothra lookalike was on his side since it had some damage dealt to the creature in front of him, but the Mothra monster was damaged even more than the female monster. Looking at her nose, she had his markings on her wings as she looked away as if embarrassed. It wasn't long until Izuku ran after the other creature as he slammed into it, causing it to be surprised, but it wouldn't go down without a fight as it bit into his gills on his neck. As Izuku felt pain in his Titan form for the first time, he was pulled down into the water by the female monster as he had no clue how to stop it from releasing its grip on him. But as soon as he faked being dead, she started to release her grip. When it was all over, he swiftly, faster than she could predict, jumped onto her body and started to rip her to shreds. His alpha instincts telling him to end it now before she could take on his champion. Whatever the hell that means. As soon as the creature had no legs to walk on, Izuku stepped onto her chest as he glared down at her as he roared into her face. She was going to die, and he would make it a swift one if she allowed him to do it. He wasn't okay with killing anything, but since she was a threat to his very existence, he wouldn't allow for her to live. As she growled in solemnness, Izuku reached down, and he bit down on her neck as her orange-gray eyes stared into his emerald mouth. He blinked twice as she blinked once as he snapped her neck with a massively loud crack. As soon as her limp body fell into the water, Izuku roared into the sky once more as the people who watched the news live had been in shock. It was here that they watched as Izuku's Titan form moved closer to the Mothra monster and they thought that he would kill the new arrival. But were pleasantly surprised when they heard a massive clicking and groans from the two of them as Izuku for some reason lifted the Mothra creature and moved towards the ocean. As soon as they were out of view from the news, the helicopters had left the area to report on the devastation that one of the monsters had done to Tokyo. Calm before the storm, Izuku swam into the ocean holding the Mothra creature to his chest as it held its breath as he went deep into the ocean. Once he was nearing the cave where he called home, he overheard from the sonar systems that came from Monarch that they were panicking over this new creature being shown to the world. He laid the creature down near his spot to collect some radiation so that they could regenerate their broken and torn wings from their battle. Whilst that was happening, Izuku slowly but surely laid down near the creature as he felt a kinship with them, nothing too bad, just a slow relationship to be formed. It was here that the creature established a connection to his mind as she started to speak to him. "It's been too long since I have long since seen another Ghidorah. Which do you spawn from?" she asked in a seemingly regal voice. "I hail from Godzilla and Mothra. They used a rite of rebirth in order to allow me to use Gaia's gift more effectively," Izuku said as the moth creature nodded their head. "My name is Momo Yaoirozu. I am sure you remember me from class." The moth creature, now aptly named Momo, asked. "You are the woman who had the more regal flair to them, yes?" Izuku asked as the moth creature nodded. "Well, nice to officially meet you, Momo, and welcome to the Titan's world," Izuku said as he smiled in his Titan form. "Don't you get some kind of identity crisis over the Titan form?" Momo asked as her form purred from his attention. "Yes, but it hasn't messed with me for a while. Although you might need to inform Izawa-sensei about your status as a Mothra specimen," Izuku said as the girl shook her head. "I am a distant cousin of Mothra's race. I am part of the Batra race of Masura," Momo said as Izuku nodded. "Well, let's get some sleep before we can go back to school in a few days," Izuku said as Momo relaxed in his cave. Monarch was in shambles, the world was under attack by multiple Mutos and they had just seen that Godzilla had taken them down on their own. But this one seemed different in size as it was slightly smaller than Godzilla, but at the same time it had moth-like eyes compared to the pure blue ones. Dr. Serizawa had made his way into the bridge when his men started freaking out when they saw Izuku's Godzilla form moving towards his little haven away from the world with Batra. "Sir Batra is seen being pulled all the way to the lost city of Atlantis," one of the soldiers called out. "Is Godzilla killing it?" Serizawa asked as the others shook their head. "He seems to be treating it with care," the soldier said as Serizawa told them to keep an eye on the situation. Grom had entered the room with some sound graphs as she showed them to Serizawa. "Serizawa, this isn't just any kind of Batra, this is a descendant of a hybrid Batra, she is quite literally the last of her kind," Grom said as Serizawa nodded his head. "What else is there to know about this Batra?" he asked as fast as possible. "She seems to be connecting to him on a molecular level, she is trying to become his champion," Grom said as Serizawa stared at her. "So, she is trying to become like how Godzilla and Mothra are in a symbiotic relationship. Not to mention an actual relationship," Serizawa said as he thought about the amount of fanfiction this might bring. "What did the Godzilla carrying the Batra's eyes look like? Green with moths or plain blue?" Serizawa asked as one of the animal experts came forward. "It was green eyes with moths, my god, that was Izuku, he defeated his first group of Mutos, all on his own, his parents will be extremely happy," Serizawa said as the others looked at him. "What do you mean Godzilla and Mothra will be happy?" Grom asked. "The first kill a Ghidorah makes is against their natural predators. The Mutants actively hunt the Ghidorahs in order to make their children spawn inside them and consume their radiation until they can no longer sustain themselves. Izuku just took two of them on, a male and female, and if Batra hadn't made it into the battle, Izuku would have fared exactly the same as his father, if not even better. Batra just provided the perfect chance to take out the male Muto before he became too much of an annoyance in his fight with the female Muto," Serizawa explained as the others understood. The call was coming from the bridge as one of the soldiers answered the call. Looking around, they found Serizawa and called him over. As the man moved towards the phone, an angry principal was heard on the other side, demanding to know where two of his students just disappeared to. "I apologize for the long wait, Principal Nezu, but your students are fine, I believe that they are both in the lost city of Atlantis," Serizawa said as there was confused speaking on the other side of the phone. "I know, Yaoirozu Momo is a part of the Batra hybrid species that was created millions of years ago. She is currently with Izuku in the bottom of the ocean, you want to see her? Sure, I can get a helicopter there and you a suit that protects you from the Earth's radiation. See you then," Serizawa said as he hung up the phone. As the hours flew by, Serizawa had busied himself on some projects that he wanted to have done for the future of the Ghidorah species as a whole. He had been keeping an eye on the entrances into the atmosphere for a while now, and there wasn't any kind of creatures coming in from the deepest parts of space. But Izuku being a very young Ghidorah, he wasn't prepared to take on threats that happened in the past like Space Godzilla as well as Ghidorah, and he certainly didn't want Biollante to return back from where she left the planet from. They were doing their research when the principal of UA had entered the room with a furious expression on his face as he moved toward Serizawa. You have 15 minutes to tell me why 2 Mutos had attacked my school without informing me and my teachers about it, the creature said angrily. As much as principal had fun with torturing the students of his school with quizzes that were easy for him, but almost impossible for the students, he did care for their safety. The simple fact that they appeared without our knowledge was more concerning than informing you, Nezu. I had no idea that there were 2 more Mutos moving about the surface until the news came out earlier today. In fact, I was trying to find out how they were able to cause so much damage without our knowledge. I apologize for not informing you sooner, principal. Serizawa said, bowing at the waist. You better be sorry. I can't allow my students to be killed by monsters and be blamed by their parents for not having the correct amount of security to prevent such attacks, Nezu said, as Serizawa looked at him. There is no way security could protect your students from a Titan attack. The only way to prevent one from happening is to stop it from happening before it can become a threat. Serizawa said, as Nezu nodded his head. What are the chances of another Titan appearing out of nowhere to challenge Izuku? Nezu asked, as he looked at the images the rovers were giving them of the lost city of Atlantis. It is really high now since there are monsters attacking the cities in search of the new king. I can only hope that the Japanese government can handle all the attacks happening. We have a new Kong on his island of Skull Island, but he isn't old enough to pose a challenge to Izuku just yet. Not to mention his alpha predator status hasn't reached the wavelengths of Izuku just yet, so there is no need to worry about him. Serizawa said, as Nezu nodded and placed his suit on. I will be in the city to gather enough information from Izuku about how to detect this kind of information. See you when I return. Nezu said, leaving the scientist to his devices. Nezu was inside the moon vehicle as it traversed the waters towards the underwater home of seemingly 2 of his students. As soon as it appeared near the edge of the Mariana Trench, it opened up a hole as he drove the vehicle into it, as the entire area was shown to be covered in gravity as it was pushed towards the city. Upon going through the small wormhole, Nezu's craft appeared on the other side of it as he saw the ruins of such a beautiful city all around himself. Looking towards where the radiation would most likely be located, he made his way over there in order to see where his students were and if they were alright. Landing the vehicle on land, he walked through the ruins as he stared at his oxygen meter as it showed that he had 100% oxygen at the moment as he nodded to himself. He soon walked up to the giant form of Izuku as he was seemingly sleeping right next to the Batra creature as he tapped its nose. As its nose made a twitching motion, it opened its orange-green eyes as it stared at him in shock and horror. Hello Yayoi Rozu-san, I am here to make sure that you are safe and sound and not dying. Are you alright from your attack against the Mutos? Nezu asked, as Momo's Titan form stared at him for a second before nodding. You aren't in need of healing from recovery, girl? He asked, further as the female creature shook its head. I see, how about Izuku? Is he in need of healing? He asked, as he looked over to the sleeping Ghidorah. No, he is fine. He is just resting his body from the amount of work he went through fighting 2 Mutos. He had used too much energy in fighting the Mutos during the fight in the USJ. Momo telepathically said, as Nezu nodded. Well, I was only here to make sure that I know about your condition. I hope that you can return by the time classes return in session on Monday. Nezu said, as Momo nodded her head. With that, the creature left the room as he focused on his job of making sure that he scares the subordinates of his colleagues. Off in the distance of Monster Island, a group of monsters noticed the energy of the growing power of Godzilla's child. We have a new king to challenge. Let's make his entrance into the power of King of the Monsters as hard as possible, one of the lion creatures said, as they all laughed. New monster strikes. Izuku was sleeping on the ground within Atlantis as he was cuddled up against another monster as she was purring softly against his heat. After realizing that there was someone else inside his home with him, Izuku woke up immediately and looked over at the creature sleeping against him. It was the Batra creature that assisted him in his fight against the 2 creatures that he had no clue existed. If he remembered correctly, the 2 creatures he fought were Mutos since he remembered Godzilla fighting against them about 100 or 2 years ago. Shaking his head as he got his bearings, he saw that there was only a couple of minutes before they had to leave for the school. Shaking the sleeping Batra from her slumber, he saw as her eyes opened up to reveal black orbs that had his Titan form within them. She then started to glow a black color as she was revealed to be Momo Yayoi Rozu as she looked at him softly as he blushed slightly at her. Looking away, he gave her enough time to place some clothes over her body as she clothed herself. As they were moving about the area, Momo spoke to him as he transformed back into his human form. So, we should talk about why I am a part of the Titan race. She asked as Izuku stared at her for a second. No, I already sensed the power of Gaia within you. I should have known that you were a child of Gaia from the beginning but chose not to. Anyway, we should be prepared to head over to the school in order to not be late. Izuku said, as Momo nodded her head. After waiting for a few minutes to change, the duo headed up to the Monarch facility as they would wait for a helicopter in order to get them to the school without having to waste energy to traverse the world to get there. As they were swimming up to the surface of the home of the humans living above the hollow earth, Izuku and Momo noticed a massive shift in the alpha predators. Izuku looked over towards the massive figure covered by the clouds as they were making their move closer and closer to the young titan. He sensed that this one was an alpha predator that had wanted to test Izuku's might against his own. Izuku, sensing the challenge, allowed Momo to leave as he went away from her position on his own in order to face off against this threat to test his own mettle. Transforming into his titan form, Izuku stood in the ocean waters as he waited for his new opponent to come over to greet him. As the creature nosedived towards him, Izuku got a good look at this new monster as it was an amalgamation of a lion, bird, as well as a lizard all in one monster as it dived further towards him. As it smashed right into his body, he was able to catch it before it forced him down into the water as it struggled to get out itself because of its feathers. Taking advantage of this, Izuku wrapped his tail around the creature as he drags it down further into the depths of the ocean, wanting to end this fight as soon as possible. As he brought it into his underwater cove where he sleeps in order to regenerate any damage dealt to him, the Griffin took to the skies again as it explored the area. Once I have defeated and killed you, Alpha, I will make sure to take over this area and make it mine, the Griffin called out, screeching as it flew towards him. Izuku watched the movements closely as the creature flew towards him at a rapid pace. It was many times faster than the male Muto that he fought on the beach of Dagaba. As he walked towards the creature, he made damn sure that his movements were precise, as well as well predicted enough to make a hit guaranteed. As soon as the Griffin was about to strike with his talons, Izuku went for the attack by grabbing said talons, causing the creature to squawk in confusion as well as surprise, as Izuku pulled him in before biting down into its thick hide and holding it there as he charged an atomic breath. The Griffin, knowing that if this hit, he will die from the close proximity of the attack, prepared his own breath attack, that was which he blew air into Izuku's face as he merely closed his eyes to keep a grip. As soon as his breath was fully charged, he felt something tearing through his skin on the hide of his face as he glared hatefully at the Griffin before releasing his breath against its hide. As it screeched in pain, Izuku pushed it back towards the ground as it flailed in pain as it tried to take to the skies once more. Before it could, however, Izuku managed to grab it with his tail and drag it to the ground where it was bowing before him as he laid it on its back and placed his foot on top of its chest. "Do you yield?" Izuku questioned through telepathy. "Never, I am the true alpha predator, I will become the king of the monsters," he cried out as he screeched. "Then death is what you need." Izuku thought towards the monster as he charged his breath attack and grabbed the beak of his opponent. As the beak of his opponent tried his best in order to prevent the inevitable, Izuku pulled the beak apart and once his charge was complete, he released his breath down the creature's mouth as it tore it apart from the inside out. As soon as the head was pulled from his body, Izuku tossed it across the ground, believing the battle to be won. As he roared out to the heavens, he thought about how this battle was seemingly too easy and stopped his roar as he watched the body closely. And sure enough, the creature began to heal itself all the way back to its original body. As it shook its body around, it looked at Izuku with a new light in its eyes. "You really wanted to kill me there, I thought we were buddies," he called out angrily. "You didn't give me a choice, I gave you an out and you didn't take it. So I did what my father told me to do against foes who wouldn't submit, kill them to prevent a new threat later on," Izuku said as the Griffin just shuddered from hearing that phrase. "Well, far be it from me to not submit ever again, I think I might get a hernia from that attack," the monster gruffly said, rubbing its ass. "Well, can I head to school now? I need to get to class without making my teacher question why I wasn't at school today," Izuku said as the Griffin just lackadaisy just swam away from the area. As Izuku watched him disappear, his father appeared behind him with a look of happiness on his face with Mothra next to him. "Well, make sure that you make it to school. We will be sure to keep those on Monster Island from attacking you during school hours, and those that do get past us, we apologize for not stopping them fast enough," Godzilla said as Izuku nodded as he left the area in order to swim back to school in time for class. As Izuku walked through the doors of his classroom, he found that his class were talking to one another as they tried to find out who was causing all the ruckus in the world. He sat down in his seat as Bakugo kept making death threats to him as if it was an everyday Tuesday, and as he sat down, the teacher entered the classroom. "Alright class, ever since the USJ happened we have needed to increase security around the school, so within the next few months, we will be implementing a school-wide dorm system soon, but that will be around your final exams. Anyway, your fight isn't over yet," Aizawa said as everyone got tensed as he spoke again. "You will be participating in the sports festival as it will be coming up in 2 weeks. the man said, as the whole class erupted into excited shouts as well as rambling about the event. Now with that stated, you will all be aware that Midoriya will not be allowed to attend such an event since he will be needed as security for the school. The man said, as he sighed angrily. What do you mean Deku will be security? He was the main issue for why we were attacked, Bakugo screamed out as Aizawa stared at him. Midoriya's reason for not participating in the sports festival is for valid reason. He is simply too powerful to even participate, you all wouldn't have your chance to get an internship since he is a too high value target for everyone. So he will be used as a temporary security option since he will be covering all the patrol areas since he can transform to escape any situation where he will be outnumbered with his sheer size. As always said, before going on a tangent about how nobody could expect to win against him. As the class ended so that Present Mick could start his own class, everyone was preparing themselves for their sports festival. I will not be doing the sports festival in this fic since Izuku will just be patrolling around the area and I don't want to write 3 chapters where he is just walking around the area of the stadium. As the day continued on for the students of class 1 they were about to leave their class at the end of the day so that they could get some lunch when they noticed the amount of people sitting outside of their class. As they were leaving their classroom the rest of the other classes looked at them to get a good look at those who survived a villain attack on their rescue lessons. What is with everyone looking at us? Kirishima asked, as Bakugo spoke up. Don't you see? They're looking at us to see how badass we are compared to the information they got from the news. The purple-haired boy said, as he looked at the situation in disgust. As the rest of the class were trying to increase their name and not be told that they were rude to others, Izuku moved forward to the boy as he stared at him. What is your quirk if you wanted to be a hero? Izuku asked, as the boy looked at him boredly. Brainwashing, I can control someone who I talk to just by speaking in a certain way. The boy said, as Izuku looked at his body build. You won't be capable of becoming a hero if you never train your actual body. If you want to be a hero so much, how about you train your body before you actually try and become one? Izuku said, as he walked down the hallway. Since you won't be participating, this is a declaration of war against your class. The boy said, walking away. Izuku looked at the young man before smirking at him as he gained a manic smile. Well, I look forward to seeing what you can do against my class with little to no training on how to fight. Izuku said, as he walked away. The rest of the other classes were watching in awe as Izuku had spoken to another student without even starting a riot before another student from the sister class came up about another war declaration to class 1A. As soon as the day was finished, Izuku had moved his location of where he will be sleeping to the UA campus as he wanted to be as near the school as possible. As Izuku was laying down in the yard of the school, he never noticed how a creature was floating high above the school as it flapped its wings in order to stay out of Izuku's range. Well, this is the current king of monsters' son. I can't wait to start a fight with him. The monster said, as it was revealed to be of a similar race to Roden. Monster fight against Roden. Izuku was getting really tired of all these kaiju attacks on him and the rest of his classmates. He just wanted a few days without any kind of attacks from these guys. They were really starting to get annoying with how frequent they had been getting. He was attacked by Scylla just 2 weeks ago, and the woman then demanded that he mate with her right then, as he was forced to flee the area as a lust-filled luxurious woman chased him down the street. He didn't know why the kaiju women had bodies that were seemingly made by the gods, and he didn't know whether that was a compliment to Momo herself or to the kaiju or a mocking. As he was moving about the shopping district on another week, he found himself going against Anguirus as the bastard had stolen ice cream from a little girl who was happy about her apple-flavored ice cream. He killed Anguirus for that. You don't steal a treat from a little girl, much less a 5-year-old little girl. He was still the protector of humanity, damn it. He shook his head at the memories of the fight with that bastard as he kept hiding in his shell, forcing him to toss the monster into the sky and blowing him up towards the upper atmosphere and blowing him up to smithereens. Never before had he been happier to kill something than that moment. He may be against killing things as well as people, but when it came to villainous monsters who take from the children of humanity, he takes it personally. Right now, though, he was trying to establish a connection to Momo Yaoirozu as she was doing the same in their monster forms since they were going to become mates in the future. He knew that their symbiotic relationship would make their connection completely worthy of becoming the new king and queen of the monsters respectively, but that would mean that they would have to fight their own battles, and Izuku was perfectly fine with that. He just had to make sure that he didn't have any more battles with kaiju at the end of the semester. But then he was called into the principal's office since there was a final exams test coming up for the practical, and they needed someone who was powerful enough to pose a threat to Izuku. The principal himself stated that the person he was fighting was a kaiju, who would have guessed. Arriving at the principal's office was a trying effort since his dorsal plates were very pointed and Izuku wanted to change them so that they wouldn't be a problem in the future. Midoriya, come and I have to talk to you about what you need to be doing for your final exams practical, Nezu said as Izuku entered the room. He noticed that there was a man in a crimson-red tuxedo as he stared at Izuku with scrutinizing eyes, and Izuku was feeling like he was being sized up. You have his eyes, as well as Mothra's symbol in your very own as well, but from what it seems like your body has evolved itself in order to take both features. You will be going up against me grandnephew, and before you ask, I am Roden, the one who was against Godzilla when he battled Ghidorah in America. Roden said, as Izuku nodded. Okay, so I am to be up against Roden in my practical? Izuku asked, as Nezu nodded. I know that you kaiju love to have your destructive battles, but at the same time you need to learn that your powerful gigantic kaiju form needs to be mindful of us little people in order to become a better king of the monsters. Nezu explained as Izuku nodded. I hope you know that I might have to leave the school in order to become a king of the kaiju monsters. Izuku said, as Nezu nodded his head. And I will make sure that Monarch has money spent in order to teach you the ethics of becoming the next hero that the monster world needs. Nezu said, as Izuku left the office with a smile on his face. Although that smile on his face was more on the lines of a pained expression, since he had been getting more and more annoyed with how he was being attacked by monsters every other week. And to hear that his final exams were going to be against Roden, the one creature that betrayed his new father, made him somewhat angered. He needed to make sure that he paid in blood for what he did to Mothra in the attack that Ghidorah had dealt to the world. Especially since he had nearly killed the queen of the monsters with his surprise attack on her beautiful wings. Izuku arrived in the lunchroom as he sat down next to Momo as they ate their radiated food. Lunch Rush had managed to make food that had radiated minerals inside of them to give them the ability to eat the same food as everyone else, but still have the radiation that they require to live. Endo had told Class 1 about how the students were likely to be fighting robots from what she heard from one of the senpais they had. Izuku was highly against the idea about fighting robots for a final exam, but he knew that since he was fighting Roden for his own finals, the students were going to definitely be fighting the teachers. It was basically being asked for since he and Momo were kaiju in disguise. He and the class arrived in Gym Gamma as they prepared for their final exam's practical test. Since Izuku was nowhere to be seen, everyone thought that Izuku was beginning his battle exercise. Alright students, you will all be taking part in a final exam that will put you all through the ringer and make sure that you utilize your quirks to the fullest extent and pin you against opponents who completely counter you all. I hope you are prepared to be up against your teachers from your classes. Nezu said as he smiled at them all. The first group was Uraraka Achako and Aoyama Yuga were up first, and their opponent was Pro-Heroine 13. The woman was a very capable pro-heroine as she was number 1 in rescue work as she had saved hundreds if not millions on her own during her tenure as a pro-heroine. She was fighting a battle-trained Achako as well as a lightly trained Yuga as they were off on the course with great gusto. Although, there was one issue: as soon as 13 used her quirk, it started to pull them both in as they were forced to hold onto some rebar as they were coming up with a plan in order to defeat the woman without getting hurt themselves. So, what's your opinion of Midoriya? Yuga asked as he smiled at Achako. Achako's face became so distant that she didn't realize that her face had begun to slowly blush in response to the question, causing her to let go of the rebar she was holding onto. Wait, what are you talking about? Achako screamed as she flew towards 13. The action catching the heroine by surprise as she stopped her quirk's effect, allowing Achako to catch the heroine further off guard and use her martial arts and slap the cuffs onto the teacher. The other matches were a mix of wins and losses as they were really pushing themselves in order to come over their teachers in terms of their training. It was all leading up to the largest match that the place was prepping for, Izuku and Roden. Momo and Achako were watching the cameras with rapt attention as they heard the distinct stomps that came from Izuku. And from the sky they found a massive pterodactyl land from the air and on top of a building that wasn't much distance from Izuku's Gajira form. They looked at his new state though, as his dorsal plates were not as sharp as they used to be and they were glowing green the entire time. What's with Izuku's new form? Aizawa asked as he looked at Nezu. It seems for this fight Izuku has altered his form to be more for an agility type of Titan form. I wonder what else he has in store for us. Nezu said as he kept making notes about Izuku's Gajira form. It was here that Momo and Achako noticed something growing from Izuku's tail, and the dorsal plates there was forming more as spikes than anything. Wow, I didn't know that Izuku was taking more from the Stegosaurus than we thought. Momo said as Achako made her observation. His arms seemed slightly longer as well, but more packed with muscle. As everyone looked even closer to Izuku's Gajira form, and it seemed to be correct. Izuku's Gajira form was still similar to its original, but for some reason he was sleeker, as well as more built for speed as well as power, since his legs were still as bulky as they were when he first appeared. His dorsal plates were much longer as well as larger than they were originally, not to mention that they were more curved than sharp, and they seemed to be having a more intimidating effect as they pulsed constantly. It seems like he is taking this threat of Roden seriously. We can't have our students getting lax in their training. All Might said, as everyone kept a close eye on the incoming fight. With Izuku he slammed his tail on the ground as Roden stared at him. He had the experience to keep up with the king of the monsters, even the queen if he wished. But this new Ghidorah was going to be a hard fight for him, since he didn't have arm claws, but only his talons that were as sharp as obsidian when carved into a knife. The buzzer sounded as Izuku took off towards Roden in a speed that Roden hadn't seen before, except when Godzilla attacked Kong in Beijing. You seem to be getting faster, I can't wait to have you fight Kong's son, Roden called out as he flew into the air. Just wait until you run out of strength to fly, I will manage to take you down, Izuku called out as he swung his tail towards Roden. The spiked tail had nearly clipped Roden's wing, as the creature had to make a last-second barrel roll in order to dodge the strike. Where did you get the time to evolve your tail like that, Roden called out as Izuku ran towards where Roden was moving towards. Trade secret, Izuku said, as he managed to grab the talon of Roden and pulled him downwards. As soon as Roden was in the clutches of Izuku's clawed hands, Izuku had pulled the creature closer to his chest as he started to squeeze the monster as hard as he could until he could hear the sounds of bones creaking in the monster. It didn't stop until Roden started to struggle to escape and pecked at Izuku's chest, as well as arms, causing him to lose his grip from the piercing power of the beak. When Roden took back to the skies, he decided to go full power from the start. Since Izuku hadn't gone full power and used his atomic ray, he knew that the young Ghidorah had managed to kill Anguirus all on his own and needed to take him seriously. He was an old titan, sure, but that didn't mean that an old dog couldn't learn new tricks, and he would use a new skill he learned from hawks as well as falcons of the animal kingdom of humanity. He flew up into the air as high as he could go before the air thinned too much for him to handle, and he folded his wings up and pointed his beak towards where he could see Izuku preparing an attack for him. If he failed this last-ditch effort attack, he would be done for and be at Izuku's mercy, but if this worked, Izuku would probably be at his mercy. He increased his speed in the air as he released a shockwave from behind himself that increased his speed as he became a missile coming towards the earth and Izuku. The young Ghidorah noticed the speed of which Roden was coming in and lowered his back to where he would seem to be injured slightly from their small scuffles. Chuckling to himself, he couldn't believe that he managed to deal enough damage to Izuku, and Roden began to increase his speed, further becoming a red comet in the sky. Izuku smiled as soon as he saw Roden chuckling to himself as his plan was coming into fruition. He lowered himself even more as he prepared for the strike of a lifetime. This was a move he used on the male Muto back during the USJ attack, and he would be using it on his grand uncle here. It would be cathartic if it killed Roden, but he wasn't aiming for the creature's heart or brain, he was aiming for a spot that would cause no internal injuries, except for internal bleeding. And as soon as Roden was upon Izuku, the Ghidorah had moved his rear towards Roden, and the creature noticed it at the last second before attempting to open his wings to pull back, but it was too late. Izuku's spiked tail had landed into Roden's lower abdomen as it pierced through his thick volcanic skin, and Izuku slammed Roden into a building, and as soon as he pulled out his tail spikes, it caused Roden to continue falling through other buildings in the area behind him. As Roden began to inspect his injuries, he found that he was mostly fine if it weren't for the small internal bleeding. He slowly got to stand back up when he heard a stomp from nearby, and he found that Izuku was standing right next to him as he stared down at him. "Kneel and respect your loss," Izuku growled as Roden chuckled. "You're not trying to become the next king of the monsters?" Roden asked as Izuku growled at him even more. Fine, you win. But next time I will be the winner," Roden said as Izuku's spines glowed even more at the respect he earned. As the buzzer had gone off, the trial was over as Izuku walked away from Roden, and as soon as he neared the area where he started off at, he transformed back into his hybrid form. "You were really strong, uncle, I hope that our next fight isn't as quick as this one was," Izuku said as he walked away. Roden chuckled to himself as he flew off towards the nearest volcano in order to consume the radiation from there, as well as use the magma to heal all the internal damage that was dealt to him. Off in the Mojave Desert, a large portal appeared as a gauntleted hand had appeared from the ground as the creature who held the weapon had pulled themselves out of it. It was soon revealed to be Kong as he crawled out of the portal and started to huff and puff before looking at his other hand that held a small child. He did some human sign language as he looked at the small child. "Are we close to where Godzilla is resting at the moment?" Kong asked through hand gestures. "I don't know, but from what I know, Ghidorah had a child here. He might be capable of fighting against Scar King at the moment because of his human intelligence, but he might not be strong enough. We need Godzilla for this, not his son," the child said as Kong nodded. They both headed for the Arctic Circle, that was where the last known location of Godzilla was recorded. And as they were leaving, they noticed a massive presence coming from behind them, and they saw that a massive orange-furred hand was slowly coming out of the portal. "We need to find Godzilla now," the girl said, as both ran towards the Arctic Circle as fast as possible. As Izuku was entering his bedroom though he felt like he noticed a massive presence that didn't belong on the surface of the earth appeared and it was as strong if not stronger than Godzilla from when the last time he saw him. "Dad, please be safe," Izuku said as he laid himself on his platform that gave him radiation. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.